that is to, talk about sports today.
I was going to say, you have a history when it comes to sports. You're doing more of the news side of things across the street over at WIS. So I wanted the opportunity to get in and talk a little bit of sports. So we're happy to be able to let you come over here and do this.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, you came at a good time, because we had the spring game over the weekend. And during football season, we call Mondays Reaction Mondays, where we basically look back on South Carolina's game and give our thoughts and let people give their thoughts as well as to what they saw. So with the spring game, I feel like the better way to phrase it is an overreaction Monday, because for the months of the offseason, we ended last year not the way you wanted to. 5-7, missed a bowl game. Offensive line was a mess. Running game was a mess. You're obviously losing a lot of pieces coming away from last year. So people wanted something optimistic to feel coming away from the spring game on Saturday. I don't exactly know if they got that full force. Saw some good things, saw some bad things, saw some things that obviously need to be worked on. But overall, what do you think the feeling coming away from Saturday was?
Well, I think offensively, I think the quarterbacks, all three quarterbacks, utilized their pocket space in very well. I think they were scrambling in and out very well, and they kind of used the weapons they had. The short pass game, they looked pretty good. On the defensive side of the ball, the line looked very promising. I know we were kind of talking about that earlier, but it's going to be interesting to see how they stop, a lot of these run games they come up against, especially in the SEC.
Yeah, and that's the tough thing about spring games, is you do have to take everything with a grain of salt. And we talked about it going into the game. Dow Loggins talked about it just like you did last year. Look, the offensive playbook is going to be vanilla. So don't look at what happened on Saturday night and be like, well, the offensive play calling wasn't very creative. We know it's not creative. You're not wanting to give your opponents any tape more than you have to before the season starts. At the same time, when it comes to the lines, offensive line was struggled a season ago. Got a lot of bodies in the room this time. At this point in the year, hopefully everybody can stay healthy. Knock on wood, obviously. Defensive line, very, very experienced. So it's not unexpected to see the defensive line have the type of day that they had on Saturday. But at the same time, the offensive line wasn't playing as a true one unit. You had a lot of guys mixed up because he's drafted teams and all that kind of stuff. So I see a lot of people freaking out, saying, oh my God, what's wrong with the offensive line? It's like, pump the brakes. Everything's going to be fine. Was it the best performance? It wasn't, but I don't think it's time to necessarily sound the alarms just yet.
Absolutely, and I think they're still plugging and placing and trying to figure out what they need. I know we were talking about they've kind of revamped that entire offensive line, or the entire offense, excuse me. They're going to need a new starting quarterback. That's still kind of up in the air who they're picking, who's really going to lead that team. And then they're going to have new wideouts, like you said. They're going to need a new starting center. So I think they're still trying to figure out, who they really want at the helm of, the offense going forward.
Yeah, and again, that's the biggest thing for these spring games, is to give people optimism going through what's going to be a long rest of the offseason. And Preston mentioned a little bit earlier, we're 131 days away from kickoff. Yeah. So we have a lot of time between now and then to, prepare ourselves mentally for what this season is going to be. And you want optimism coming away from the spring games. People can say, okay, well, here's the path. Here's how many games I think we can win, as opposed to saying, well, we're going to lose, 5-6 games again this year and miss a bowl game.
Yeah, and I mean, it shows, what the pieces you do have in place, are kind of capable of doing so far. Like you said, it's over 130 days away from the season. It's a long off season, and it's a hot summer, and these guys are going to be here working hard, so...
Speaking of hot summers, this will be your first summer in Columbia.
Oh, yeah.
So you will get to experience the hottest place on earth, as many people like to call it.
I'm excited.
Yeah, and you're from New York State. So what was the hottest summer in New York State?
So I grew up in New York City. And I remember one summer, it was about, I got back from camp, and day camp, and it must have been like 105, 106 degrees.
Okay.
I used to go up at camp in Pearl River, New York, up in Rockland County. And I remember I was probably 5 or 6 years old, and my dad was slinging me over his shoulder because I was so dehydrated.
Yeah.
And that was probably the hottest summer I remember, being in New York. But, being upstate in Ithaca, I mean, it does get pretty toasty up there, too. Don't get me wrong.
Now, do y'all deal with the humidity up there? 'Cause that's the biggest thing down here, is it's hot and it's very humid.
Yeah, it's not, we don't get southeast humidity.
Okay. That's what's going to get you.
Yeah. That I'm fearing, but the one perk to this winter has been not scraping ice off my windshield.
Well, there you go. There's some mornings where it's got that frost, whatever you call it, on there that you have to kind of, run the heater for a minute to get it to melt off. But yes, you don't exactly have to get out there with an ice scraper.
Yeah, would definitely trade the humidity for the ice scraper.
Well, if you get a chance to be in Williams-Brice Stadium this fall, especially on August 31st, I can tell you it's going to be very, very hot when they're whatever time they're playing Old Dominion, whether it be 7 o'clock or high noon. It's going to be very, very hot that day.
Looking forward to it.
So that's just one part. That first month to month and a half of the season, it's deathly hot. October can still be 95, 100 degrees. So I'm just helping prepare you for this fall.
So does that propose a home field advantage maybe for the Gamecocks?
It can to a degree. Now, for week number 1, you're playing Old Dominion. They're from Virginia. It gets pretty warm up there. But, if you were playing, say, in Eastern Michigan or something like that, I'd say that's a distinct home field advantage because, again, up north can get hot, but it's not going to be the, densely humid hot where you feel like it's not only hot, but it's also bearing down on you at the same time.
Interesting. Looking ahead to the family weekend game against Akron.
Because that's week 3, 4.
Yeah, it's the fourth.
Yeah, fourth week. So that'll be late September. Yeah, it'll still be pretty hot down here.
Because I'd imagine, we just had a team up in Cleveland, and they were telling me, I was freezing the whole time. And
sure.
Being here, you forget, the Midwest is still 40, 45 degrees.
Right.
I think that there was one point during their trip, there was hail coming down and everything.
Yeah.
So it's so wild.
Yeah, it's a completely different world. And, again, we're going to be dealing with the long, hot summer. And hopefully you give people some optimism coming away from Saturday to be able to enjoy that summer a little bit more instead of looking forward to another disappointing season when the fall rolls around.
I mean, I think it's easier to get, maybe just for me, it might be easier to get colder. It's a lot easier to point a fan in your face than it is to, throw on 150 layers and, try to warm up.
Yeah, you say that. Wait till you experience that first 100-degree day.
Oh, geez.
Might change your tone a little bit. But again, regardless, Saturday night, fun night. Obviously cool to get everybody in Williams-Brice Stadium for the first time in a while. It seemed like the crowd was pretty good. Weather held off a little bit. Didn't rain until Sunday. And, I think most people understand kind of how much stock you can put into a game like this to not say, oh, my God, we know everything about this team, or, oh, my God, we're going to be the greatest team ever coming away from Saturday. We'll just kind of see how people feel as the months roll along as we get closer to the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, watching when people get teased almost with, football in the spring, the last football we got was kind of in February with the NFL technically. But I feel like when you go a couple months and then you start talking about, free agency, the draft, and you're not really watching games, full speed action going on. Then when you finally see that action for the first time, even if it's in the form of just a spring game like this, you kind of jump up in your seat a little bit when you see those first couple snaps because you're like, oh yeah, that's what I've been excited about, the last 3-4 months, that the building up towards, even though this is just kind of a overreaction game, kind of just a little trailer on what's to come.
Right. If you have any thoughts you want to share from the spring game, hit us up, Firehouse Subs, text on 803-404-6100, same number for the Love Chevrolet phone lines. Already got one weighing in. Alan already hitting us up this morning saying, not blaming you at all, but sounds like a broken record for the past 3 years regarding the offensive line. Go back and run the tape every year, the same comments. It'll be the same thing next year. Mark my words. I hope you're wrong, Alan. I could see how coming away from Saturday you would feel that way because it definitely, you saw the defensive front have a lot better game than the offensive front did. I will say, again, you had the offensive line very much broken up because it was drafted teams, so you didn't have what we deemed to be the true ones working together on the offensive line. It was a lot of a mixed bag. Marquis Anderson had a back injury for the game that he was dealing with, so you didn't have what you deemed to be your true starting five working together. So again, I take it with a little bit of a grain of salt.
Yeah, and I think, again, going back to, the quarterbacks kind of using the pocket spacing, I think it kind of forced them to kind of utilize that backfield a lot more than they would have needed to if, the line, weren't experiencing some of those kind of issues. So I think it kind of, it was interesting because it kind of gave a taste to show the mobility in, all three quarterbacks.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it was a quick whistle as well. Coach Beamer was on TV doing the broadcasting as well as
Yeah.
blowing the whistle too. So anytime somebody got a hand on a quarterback, they were counting as a sack. So those numbers are skewed a whole lot more in the favor of the defense, which is good because that's forcing the quarterbacks to be on their toes and flush the pocket and stuff like that, as well as bring more of a spotlight to the offensive line and allowing those guys to get in the vicinity of the quarterback. So again, it's all of a learning experience. It's a scrimmage. It's practice, another opportunity. But again, I can see how people would be concerned about the offensive line, but I advise to pump the brakes for now.
Absolutely. No, I agree.
So we'll have more thoughts on this. We'll dive a little bit into the quarterback battle. Let you hear from what Coach Beamer had to say coming away from Saturday night's game as we react all day long to the spring game from Saturday night. It is the Extra Point. He is Sam Shapiro. I'm Tyler Head. Ed Bird producing on the other side of the glass on the Extra Point on your Monday here on the game.
Snaps it out. Here comes pressure. Sellers steps up. Now he's going to roll to his left, looking to run. Sellers has an angle towards the end zone. Sellers, 5 into the end zone. Touchdown. Lenora Sellers scrambles from 13 yards out, and their redshirt freshman gets guarded on the board at the 5:29 mark.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point here on the game. Tyler Head, Sam Shapiro, Ed Bird producing on the other side of the glass, reacting to what we saw on Saturday night at Williams-Brice Stadium with the South Carolina spring game. That was Chris Miller on the call right here on the Gamecocks Radio Network and 107.5 The Game, as Nora Sellers scored the first touchdown of the game on a long scramble to give the Garnet team the 7-0 lead at that point in time. And Sam, going into this game, if there was one guy everybody was definitely going to keep their eye on, it was going to be Lenora Sellers, as he is assumed to take over the starting role that Spencer Rattler is left behind. Not official yet, but he certainly looked the part on Saturday.
He definitely looked like a starter indeed. I mean, like we were talking about just now, really utilized that pocket space and had the quick short game pass. It looked pretty well, but I mean, like you said, he scoring that first touchdown, he really got the crowd going just for a spring game.
Yeah, and we saw the glimpses of him a season ago. Again, Spencer Rattler was a starter last year. There was no competition to be had there. Sellers comes in, local guy, highly touted prospect coming as a 4-star. When he got on the field against Furman and Vanderbilt, you saw those glimpses. Threw a long touchdown pass to Tyshawn Russell against Vanderbilt, against Furman, had a long touchdown run against Vanderbilt. You saw the potential of what he could be. Now that, again, it's his job to lose, I feel like, at this point in time. The reins are being turned over to him. And again, it's a spring game. It's not the end-all, be-all, but he looked exactly how you wanted him to look on Saturday.
Right, and, we were kind of talking about, like, they were having offensive line issues. He was kind of working well with those issues, in addition to, having to work with, some of those new offensive pieces as well. But, given for a spring game, it looked like he was doing a pretty good job.
Into the game, 9 of 11 through the air for 70 yards, no touchdowns. Also ran 5 times, 38 yards, including that touchdown to give Garnet the early 7-0 lead. And this is going to be such a different offense built around him. And Dow Loggins talked about that, where Spencer Rattler had the ability to run. He was athletic enough to do that, but that was not his main MO. He sat back in the pocket, let things develop down the field. And if you saw nothing, or if the line was just collapsing around him, he was able to escape, get yardage, get himself out of trouble. Sellers, one of his main MOs is going to be running the ball. Still has strong arm, but we're going to see a lot of RPOs. We're going to see a lot of quarterback scrambles. It's going to be a very different offense with Lenora Sellers or potentially Robbie Ashford at the helm.
Yeah, I want to see how they kind of utilize the run game and how they kind of weave in, that short pass game into that as well. I think there were signs they were, trying to get the screen pass game really going in addition, but I think, they were doing a lot of ground and pound and the short, not screen passes, but, kind of first down territory type.
They kept it pretty short and minimal, nothing really down the field, which you also don't have like a super tall wide receiver that you can throw those high-pointed balls to right now. So that could have played a factor into it. Also, the fact that you want to keep your offense very vanilla. If you have some more elaborate things down the field, you certainly don't want to give that away. So, again, as expected, it was a very conservative night of play calling. But from what we saw, everything looked fine from Sellers' part.
You think they got anything in their artillery or that they're maybe saving up their sleeve?
I'm sure they do. And again, Dow Loggins was very straightforward last week, saying it's going to be vanilla ice cream as it was a season ago. We're not going to give anything away, which I think is especially important this year because you are breaking in a new offense. Where a season ago, it was going to look pretty similar to 2022 because, again, it's still your same guy at the helm with Spencer Rattler. It was just going to be more tailored specifically to his skill set, not necessarily him sliding into whatever Marcus Satterfield had going on the year before. But this is a completely different offense, completely different dynamic to it, so many new faces. So, yeah, wanting to do whatever you could to keep things as under wraps as possible on Saturday.
Right, and, I think the basis of a great team, it always starts with kind of the foundation of just, solidifying the basics, having the roots, having the fundamentals, solidified. And
sure.
Even if it's just, the basic vanilla parts of, that offense and kind of just, if you can do the basics, then you can add flavor to it. So
sure.
I think they just want to make sure they, have all their ducks in a row before they start adding some Flav to, whatever offense they want to bring this fall.
Exactly. And for what we saw, again, Sellers looked good. And, if we're having to put a pecking order out right now, I'd say he's still definitively number one. Robbie Ashford, the one that, is that other guy giving him the option or giving him, competition at the quarterback spot right now. Went out there. We knew his throwing ability wasn't the best, and you saw that on display on Saturday. Didn't really throw the ball a whole lot. His running ability is just fine, which we knew that coming away from Auburn. But I didn't see anything from Robbie Ashford that told me, yes, he can be the starter as of right now.
Yeah, kind of just, again, going back to Sellers, I mean, you kind of can't. Like you said, it's kind of Sellers' job to lose at this point. And, I kind of want to see more from him if he could, kind of develop that throwing ability over this, over the summer, like we were talking about. It's a long summer, so.
Yeah, and I appreciate the fact that Robbie Ashford's been very straightforward about not getting the development that he wanted to at Auburn coming in here. So is his passing ability something that could come along as the summer goes along? Absolutely. It does put him at a disadvantage knowing that Sellers has a little bit better arm than him right now, especially considering the fact that running game's a little bit comparable based on what they were able to do and what we saw on Saturday night. So, again, I would give the nod to Sellers right now. But Robbie Ashford, he looked fine for what we were able to see. And, could it, if nothing else, serve as a very serviceable backup when the fall rolls around.
Yeah, and kind of going back to all three quarterbacks, I think they all played pretty well, given a spring game, nothing serious, sticking to kind of just the basics. I think it shows, kind of what they've learned so far is kind of helped them at least kind of put them in the position to, get ready to, bring that new offense to, this fall. And I want to see how that kind of it'll be interesting to see how they build on it, especially with the tough first 4 or 5 games they have this year.
Right. So, again, the quarterback competition is between Lenore Sellers and Robbie Ashford right now. Dante Reno and Davis Bevel also in that quarterback room. I didn't really feel like there was a lot of pressure on either one of those guys going into Saturday night. That, yes, theoretically it's an open competition, but we kind of know the two guys that have separated themselves. So for Reno and Bevel, you just wanted to see some promise out of those guys, especially Dante Reno coming in as a true freshman. I didn't have any expectations put on him. I thought he looked okay, did throw the one interception, also was able to lead the team down the field and get the touchdown pass to cement the victory for the Garnet team 17-0 when he found Maurice Brown for 17 yards. But he's somebody that is not expected to come in here and contribute right away. He's somebody that's going to take the time to marinate, develop within the system, and could theoretically be your starter 2-3 years down the line. So at this point right now, I don't take a whole lot away from what Reno did on Saturday night. I thought he looked fine for the little bit that we saw of him.
Yeah, and it's kind of nice to have, long-term investments like that kind of, in your back pocket, God forbid in an instance where you need to, bring somebody up from the depth charts to kind of step in and, take over the helm and help the team kind of, orchestrate through the rest of the year. It's kind of nice to have that reassurance.
Right. And then Davis Bevel coming in from Oklahoma, prior starting experience from his time at Pitt. Again, he's not even on scholarship as of right now. He's a walk-on quarterback at this point in time, so not too much stock being put in him. And I think he suffered the most from not having a great offensive line because it seemed like every time he dropped back, he was getting quote-unquote sacked. Basically, anytime a defender got a hand on him. So didn't really get to see him flex too much of his muscle on Saturday either.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like he'll be ready for anything then.
I was going to say, definitely had to keep his head on a swivel there in terms of the amount of playing time that he was able to get in Saturday's spring game. We'll go cut number 14 here, Ed. This is Coach Beamer when asked after the game on Saturday the time frame of naming a starting quarterback.
I can't believe it took to question 8 or 9. I'm sure David was going to come with that when he asked about Lenore's. No, I know when you see him get an award at halftime, it's easy to say, okay, well, he got the award. Surely he's going to be the starting quarterback. Those are all things that we'll sit down. Obviously, we evaluate all 15 practices, and he did a good job tonight. So to answer your question, no, we start. I'll watch the tape of this. We'll sit down and start player meetings with our guys Monday morning at 7 a.m. With players in my office for the next 3 days, and I'll have those conversations with the staff and those players as far as where their role is, and then go from there.
And as Coach Beamer talked about last week heading into the spring game, there's positives and negatives, or I think it was Dow Logan, excuse me. There's positives and negatives to naming a starting quarterback right now or not naming one. If you have the positive side of things, it kind of establishes who your leader is going to be from that standpoint. On the negative side of things, it also allows your opponents down the road to go ahead and start putting together a notebook on one specific quarterback. No, he's going to be the starter. And again, I think Sellers definitely has a distinct advantage right now. I didn't see anything from Robbie Ashford or any any of the other quarterbacks, say, man, this guy's going to really give him a run for his money. But at the same time, especially considering the fact that Sellers has never been a starter before, you want to be super sure he's going to be your guy. And taking the summer, maybe even into fall camp for making that decision is okay with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it seems like this group of guys, they'll rally behind anybody they kind of point to that, okay, this is the lead, he's a leader on this team, and, he's going to pave that path to victory. And, whether they name him now or in a couple months, it's not a major rush. I think, these guys really stick together, and I think, whoever they name, they'll respect whoever that is and will follow that leader.
And again, if you had to give me the vote right now, I'd say it's Lenore Sellers. And if Robbie Ashford just comes out of nowhere in fall camp, is able to look marginally better than he did on Saturday night, then I certainly think he can be in the mix. But I don't see, if I had to bet right now, which I'm not a betting guy, if I had to bet right now, I would give the serious nod to Lenore Sellers. But at the same time, I can understand wanting to flesh it out and let the competition continue to roll.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it just keeps that healthy competition going kind of throughout the summer, Both quarterbacks, again, that have, that extra motivation to work, even harder. But, it'll be interesting to, again, like I said, I also think it's kind of Sellers' job to lose, but it'll be interesting to see what happens over the summer.
And again, that con side of things of not really having the established leader at that spot, I thought Dow Longan said something interesting last week as well, that the guys in the locker room know. Like, the guys in the locker room know before they name a starting quarterback who that guy's going to be. And I think the sentiment within this team right now is it's definitely going to be Lenore Sellers unless something drastic changes between now and when the season starts. So I don't even think that's a big deterrent on, it's going to divide the locker room or something like that. Because Sellers has been ingrained in this team for a year now. He's most likely everybody's guy at this point, and everybody else is a newer face, and I don't think quite has the backing that Sellers would in the locker room at this point.
Yeah, and he almost, that also almost kind of poses an advantage to him, because he's been able to kind of watch, how the system has worked last year and, kind of take the differences from that team and now actually being able to apply them to this team, kind of seeing what worked from that equation and then, weaving that in with the differences this year.
And that's the benefit of being able to come in as a true freshman and sit behind somebody like Spencer Rattler that was so experienced and played so much college football up to that point. And yes, they play two different styles of quarterback, but being able to sit and learn from a guy that just has so much knowledge and so much real-world experience in the game, I think helps Sellers even more going into what we assumed is going to be his first year as a starter this year.
Honestly, I'm very excited to see what he can do.
Absolutely, and I think there's going to be a lot of buzz, a lot of hype around him if he can play like he did on Saturday night when the season finally rolls around this upcoming fall. We'll jump to the defensive side of things, take a look at who was bringing the wood on Saturday night, sponsored by our friends over at Georgia Pacific. Coming up, it is The Extra Point. He's Sam Shapiro. I'm Tyler Head. Ed Bird producing on the other side of the glass on your Overreaction Monday here on The Game. Welcome back into the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you. Our new friend Sam Shapiro hanging out here with us on this Overreaction Monday. Ed Bird producing on the other side of the glass. It is indeed time to talk hardwood from our friends over at Georgia Pacific. And since we're talking football, we'll rebrand this as Bringing the Wood. And somebody that brought the wood on Saturday was Dylan Stewart. Now, Stewart coming in as a 5-star, especially at the edge position, is going to garner a lot of hype. You know, similar to like Jadeveon Clowney all those years ago. And again, we take everything with a grain of salt, but I don't think he could have looked any better than he did in the spring game on Saturday night.
Absolutely. I mean, I know me and you were both talking about this. Some of this, you know, it wasn't full blown, like they were letting the guys, you know, totally lay a guy out or whatever. But yeah, he definitely was, you know, getting into the pocket pretty quickly.
The thing that stuck out the most to me, just outside of the play on the field, the physical standpoint. Dude just looks like a monster out there. I mean, his size, his speed, like all the intangibles that you want for somebody good coming off the edge, Dylan Stewart seems to possess that.
And I know we were kind of talking about, you know, the run game kind of got stuffed up the middle. He was a big force in, you know, kind of mitigating that.
So his final stat line from the game, and again, this is why he is our Bringing the Wood winner of the week, sponsored by our friends over at Georgia Pacific. 1 sack, 3 tackles, all of them for losses. So was very active in the backfield. And again, the sacks count as just getting your hand on the quarterback. But the fact that he is getting there and affecting the quarterback to any degree is huge positive. Obviously, we want to see those full-fledged sacks when the season rolls around. But I really can't think of a better way to get your first official introduction to Dylan Stewart than what we saw on Saturday.
It definitely got people that were enthusiastic about the line Jadeveon Clowney was a part of, you know, definitely got people, you know, up out of their seats looking at that. I mean, I was kind of watching it going, does this ring a bell?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's going to give people a lot of hope going into the season because you saw what you expected to see. Anytime somebody comes in as a 5-star, whatever position they're going to be, we automatically put them on this pedestal. And the second we're not seeing the results we expect out of them, what's wrong with this guy? Did we waste a scholarship on him? Is he not really a 5-star? Like, people are so quick to judge these type of positions, and there's going to be ups and downs. Dylan Stewart, depending on how much he plays, probably going to have good games, probably going to have bad games when the fall rolls around. But, you know, from this standpoint at least, people are buying into the hype of what they've seen so far.
Yeah, and I think people just need to remember, you know, 5-star recruit, but first-year player, you know, so like you were saying, some guys come out and they're, you know, pro-ready, you know, right out the gate, but then sometimes they take a couple months, even a few years to really develop into, you know, that 5-star recruit they initially were. So, you know, hopefully we'd like to see him do that, you know, his first year, but if he's not laying guys out until his sophomore, junior year, that, you know, as a kid.
Now, the funny thing about that is in the advent of the transfer portal, you never know how long guys are going to stick around from a year-to-year basis. So you want people to come in and make an impact right away and then hope you can hang on to them after year number 1, and hopefully they stick around for a while.
Well, yeah, and you know, somebody with talent like that, I mean, especially if you're investing in them for the long haul, you really want them to kind of stick around just to, you know, you want to get out what you put in. So
right. Let's go cut number 12 here, Ed, if you can. Coach Beamer, after the game, talking about what he saw from Dylan Stewart on Saturday night.
Yeah, great point. He's I think it was Luke Day a couple weeks ago made the comment to me. He's like, you know, those players that are highly recruited, they're highly recruited for a reason because they can adjust to college football really quickly. And I would put Dylan Stewart in that group. I would put Josiah Thompson in that group. 2 guys highly recruited, could have gone anywhere in the country, and they chose to come here. Mazio Bennett. A lot of our guys in that freshman class. But Dylan's been a guy that's really just, it's never been too big for him. And the moment, practice, whatever it might be, certainly was an adjustment in January when he comes here and he starts classes and he's in a weight program and all that. That was an adjustment. But as far as being out on the field, that's when he's at his best. Man, he's just he's a really good player. He's a great young man. He's doing really well in school. And he's been like that all spring. Our scrimmage 2 weeks ago here in the stadium, he was probably the most impressive guy up front that we had on defense. He and Mazio both had a great day 2 weeks ago, and I thought he finished strong and had fun out there tonight. He doesn't say much at all, but he's just the same guy all the time. But when it's go time, look out because he can go.
Coach Beamer mentions he doesn't say a whole lot, and he was a part of the post-game presser after the game on Saturday as well. I don't think I've ever heard him speak for more than like 8 seconds at a time.
He had a lot. I was going to say that's a surprise to me. He had a lot to say.
I was going to say he let the play on the field do the talking.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's nice to know his players are doing well in school, but I think he's more excited. Well, I think he's just as excited to see that his players are, excited to bring the heat even in such a not hyped up game.
Well, and the edge position is so interesting. And I know you weren't here for the full season a year ago, but it was a spot that was very hit or miss. There were some games where it looked like there was nobody coming off the edge at all because they just weren't getting heat on quarterbacks. Had a guy in Jordan Strawn last year that would pop and get a couple sacks here and there, but for the most part, it was a position that lacked a whole lot through the course of the season. And when you look at what Dylan Stewart did last night, or on Saturday night, you look at Brian Thomas Jr., and the production he had. Kyle Kennard had some good spots out there as well. Like, you're seeing the pieces of what is hopefully a big turnaround for that one position group going into this season.
Absolutely. No, I mean, it definitely seems like he's excited to see what these guys can do because, Beamer was kind of explaining how, these guys could have gone anywhere and they would have, left this mark on any program, but, they wanted to play for the Gamecocks, and they wanted to work with this program. So I think it speaks volumes to what Beamer can kind of offer them, but what they're trying to develop here.
And in the SEC, everybody knows this. If you can't set the edge and you can't get heat on quarterbacks, they're going to kill you.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you have to be able to get in the backfield, affect those quarterbacks, both from the edge and from the internal defensive line as well. But, again, it was something that just lacked for so much of the season for the Gamecocks a year ago. And, again, take it with a grain of salt because it was just a spring game, but you saw what you wanted to see out of that group at least from Saturday night.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I even went back and I was watching some of the highlights, and I was like, oh, the run game is getting stuffed up the middle.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, too, is for Dylan Stewart specifically, and again, that's why he's winning our Bringing the Wood Award of the Week, sponsored by our friends over at Georgia Pacific. It wasn't just getting to the quarterback. It was making tackles for losses. He had one hit, I think, on Mazio Bennett as well, when he caught one out in the out on the screen, like out in the flat, and hit him for a loss. So, like, he was getting back there and affecting the run game, the pass game, as well as getting to the quarterback, too. So all three phases of offense, Dylan Stewart was having an effect on.
Mm-hmm. And I know we were kind of talking about, not a lot of deep balls, not a lot of deep action in the air kind of going on. And I think, them kind of Dylan Stewart and, that line kind of putting the pressure on them kind of mitigated, any kind of time that, the offense could really put something together that would, get them down the field in one or two plays.
Yeah, and that's a good point, too, not really letting things develop down the field, and especially when you have a quarterback like Sellers that is a little more inept to break and run earlier than somebody like Spencer Rattler did a season ago. Didn't let a whole lot of things develop down the field. I think I remember him I think Ashford threw one of the balls deep and overthrew whoever his intended target was at that point in time. But for the most part, they kept things pretty short, which, again, goes back to just the offense as a whole being vanilla, which is okay coming away from a spring game. I saw people overreacting to that on Saturday night, like, oh, Dow Loggins, not creative when calling plays. I'm like, guys, we know what this is.
They're just
chill
trying
out.
to stick to the bread and butter.
Exactly. They're not giving anything away. And again, not that they need to keep things secret to beat Old Dominion, but Kentucky in week 2. LSU early on in the season, like, you don't want to give more away than you have to at any point during the year. And again, very vanilla, which I was fine with, and what we saw from the offense outside of the offensive line was okay.
It was promising for a spring game, I could tell you that.
Yeah, which again, that's what this whole thing's about. Be optimistic. Give people something to be excited about, and give them little glimpses to just give them a tease for what the season's going to be, hopefully. And that's the thing about the spring game, too. It's just 15 practices. You take an assessment of what you saw, and you develop from there. Saying, all right, through spring and through the spring game, this is where we're good, this is where we were bad. Let's spend the summer working on what we were bad at while continuing to refine what we're good at, as well as through fall camp, so we can be better when the season rolls around.
The one thing I think everybody could take away from this past weekend is I don't think anybody stepped on the field and looked at whatever, over the last couple weeks and went, oh, this is horrifying. Next season's going to be a disaster. I don't think anybody said that. So.
Yeah, I think it was last year's spring game with Florida. They ended like 10-7 or something like that.
Yeah,
And
no,
the
thank you.
collective down there was melting down like, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. Now they did end up going 5-7 themselves and missing a bowl game, but it wasn't as bad as people were making it out to be. So again, you got to pump the brakes, take with a grain of salt, and understand there's still work to be done before the season gets here.
Mm-hmm.
We'll come back, wrap up hour number one. An interesting thing happened before the game that changed the lives of a couple of people in attendance. We'll dive into that and give our thoughts as we wrap up hour number one of The Extra Point. He is Sam Shapiro from WIS-TV. I'm Tyler Head. Ed Britter producing on the other side of the glass for us on this Monday here on The Game.
When did they change that rule in college football?
When it's on. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Sam Shapiro wrapping up hour number 1. Appreciate everybody watching us on the Game TV, sponsored by our friends over at Shepherd's Glass and powered by Integrated Media. You can also check us out on the 107.5 The Game app. Just go online to the iTunes Store or the Google Play Store. Give us a download and take us with you wherever you go. So prior to Saturday night's game at Williams-Brice Stadium, they showed this on the TV. Coach Beamer talked about it after the game as well. A couple got engaged. A guy proposed to his girlfriend down in one of the end zones. Coach Beamer went down there and congratulated them on being engaged out there at the spring game. He also spoke about it after the game. Cut number 11 here, Ed.
I just think it's really cool that someone would do that. I had no idea they were doing it. I was as surprised as anybody, and I didn't want to run out there and steal their moment, so I tried to just stand on the sideline and let them have their moment and say hello to them when they were done. But really, all I said was just congratulations and how cool that was. But it's pretty cool. So what's great about, college athletics, whatever you want to call it, that he felt this would be the place to do it and to be in that environment, but that this place means so much to them that's where he wanted to propose to her as well, which is pretty cool. And just being able to hear stories from people about what South Carolina means to them. And I know what it means to me. I mean, I didn't go to school here, but I know how special this place is and how much I love Columbia, South Carolina, and this university. And pretty cool to see two people that feel something similar.
And I agree with him. I do think it's cool that people, or those two, valued Williams-Brice Stadium, South Carolina, enough to make that a part of their, engagement. I will say this. If you're going to propose to your significant other at a sporting event, make sure that is something that they would be cool with, because I don't feel like every woman would find that as romantic.
Yeah, I think it's definitely got to be, a couple thing, or, it's got to be something between, two people that, it's got to be a shared connection.
Sure.
And I think in that case, it could even make it, more special, for especially couples, maybe that would meet at USC or,
right,
met down in Columbia, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. But if your girlfriend doesn't like sports, has never been to a football game or anything in her life, and wouldn't have a significance and a meaning to it taking place there, I'd recommend against doing that.
Yeah, I don't think I'm certified to give anybody any type of dating advice, but if I could give anything, if your girlfriend is not about sports, I would not take that route.
Yeah, so I proposed to my wife, basically at the place where we met in college, or at least in the vicinity of where we met. So there was meaning there. Now, she enjoys sports and she likes watching sports with me, but if I'd have done it at a football field or at a baseball game or something like that, I don't think she would have enjoyed that as much.
Yeah, I don't think you would have got the answer you were looking for.
I still think I would have gotten the yes, but I don't think it would have been as special because there wasn't as much significance on that end to her, which, again, at the end of the day, you're trying to make it a special moment that gets talked about and remembered forever, where, you don't want to be, on the 7th inning of Columbia Fireflies game, I got proposed to. Great. Not saying, which, again, if that's your thing, if your partner's on board with that, cool. If that's not her thing, I wouldn't recommend doing it.
Well, I got one friend, and he'll know who I'm talking about if he hears who it is. But I had one buddy, and him and his girlfriend went to Penn State, and he actually proposed to her at a Penn State tailgate, and it was broadcasted on ESPN.
Okay.
So I think when you have it literally cemented in sports history forever, I mean, that's kind of sick.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Now she was cool with this, right?
Oh, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. But, I guess I don't think that was kind of like the starting foundation of, so I'm going to propose to you when the Nittany Lions are on the 25-yard.
Right. Well, and, some people don't plan it out. It just kind of happens in the spur of the moment, and maybe that was that situation.
I mean, it very much could have been, but I don't know. It's not, personally, I could not see myself doing it, but, if, the hallmark for a great relationship, if you have that bond, I mean, hey, that's one-on-one, that's special. Take advantage of that.
Well, and hey, if you can get on TV like your friends did, or like the people on Saturday night at Williams-Brice Stadium did, that just makes that moment last even longer, because it literally is recorded forever.
the coolest part of that has to be the super, where it's got either your names in the bottom or like couple gets engaged, or I mean, I'd frame that and like put it on my wall. Would you not?
Oh, absolutely. I would save that clip and have it on every phone, every device I have. So people say, hey, how'd you get engaged? I'd be like, well, let me show you.
Or, down the line, maybe family members. So how'd you meet, or, telling my future son or daughter, so this is how I met your mother.
Good reference there. By the way, I loved you talking about supers, because that's total TV nerd insight.
TV lingo, yeah.
Not everybody's going to understand, but I get it. I appreciate that.
It's the box at the bottom of the screen with all the words on it.
Supers, lower thirds, however you want to refer to it as.
It's a different language everywhere you go, but it's all the same language, if that makes sense.
I was going to say, we're going to have to get you up to speed on some of the it's a crawl. Okay, a crawl, as our producer Ed Bird tells us in our ear. That was that's what you have on ESPN, the bottom ticker that's telling you on the sports news, stuff like that as well. So we'll have to get you up to speed on some of the radio lingo now that you're going to be joining us on a weekly basis.
Sounds good. I'm always interested in learning a new language.
You'll get up to speed with it just fine. Don't worry. That'll do it for hour number 1. Hour number 2 of the X Point coming up next. We'll continue to talk about the spring game, get some thoughts from some of the players on how they felt being in Williams-Brice Stadium for the first time. Also dive into some of the new rule changes coming to college football in 2024, as well as talking some baseball too. Again, one more hour to go. It is the Extra Point. He's Sam Shapiro from WIS-TV. I'm Tyler Head. Ed Bird producing on the other side of the glass for us on your Overreaction Monday here on The Game.
It was crazy. It was a blessing. Like you just said, the fans were amazing. Playing in front of so many people. The other day I looked up how many people could fit in my old stadium, and it was about 30,000. And like today, I went out there and it was like 20,000 or something. And like I have never played in front of that before, so it was pretty cool. And then when the lights went off and flashing all red, it was amazing, man.
Welcome back in the Extra Point, hour number 2. Tyler Head, Sam Shapiro, Ed Bird, along with you on this Overreaction Monday. That was Oscar Attaway, new running back for the Gamecocks, giving his perspective on his first time inside Williams-Brice Stadium, at least with a crowd out there at the spring game on Saturday night. And, around 30,000 or so people, it seemed like they're in attendance, and quite a bit more than we're watching him when he was playing at North Texas a season ago. So that's something that almost kind of gets overlooked when you talk about a spring game. Is you have so many guys either coming in from playing high school football or guys that have transferred in from smaller schools that have never played, at least for a home crowd, in some of the big environments like you see in Williams-Brice Stadium.
I think definitely at first when some of those guys step into, Williams-Brice for the first time, it's got to send chills, down your back. It's got to make your stomach feel a little hollow. But I think after first couple snaps, they start to feel familiar. It starts to kind of feel what they're used to.
And playing at a place like North Texas, he's been in plenty of big venues before, but that was, again, a lot of opposing fans cheering against them, towards creating a hostile environment for you. So being able to go into this season taking on Old Dominion week number 1, where that crowd is finally at your side with, 80,000 people cheering for you, that's going to be a little bit different, but it'll be very cool and always interesting to see how these guys react.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be... like we were kind of talking about, I think it'll be very, like when these, like you were saying with high school, coming into that environment and having 30,000 people, cheering you on, especially, in the middle of spring, those guys especially are not used to that kind of, focus or, that amount of people kind of watching them and, being in that environment. But I think it's definitely something that is easily adjustable. Like people could easily get adjusted to.
I'd be willing to bet there weren't more than 2,000 or 3,000 people at North Texas spring game this year or last year when he was playing for them. So definitely a little bit of a different vibe watching this game through April at a place here compared to where he was at before.
Yeah, and with these spring games, I personally kind of go back and forth. I mean, should you be excited? Should you be overly excited about it? Should you be kind of reserved about it? Should you kind of take it with a grain of salt? Should you take it with a grain of anything?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's why you can't buy everything into what you see on Saturday night, but you try and take some positive things away from it. And one positive was Oscar Attaway getting a heavy dose of the work for the Garnet team as far as running the ball went. Now, again, you're playing without Rocket Sanders. He's still coming back from his injury and will be the presumed number 1 guy when the fall does roll around. But what I saw out of Oscar Attaway on Saturday definitely gives you the indication that he's probably going to be that number 2 in the running back room, which, again, when you talk about everybody kind of having a back-by-committee approach in today's world of college football, definitely going to get a good amount of run in that running back spot.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see a nice new fresh set of legs, joining that backfield, and it'll be interesting to see, what he can do, especially for that new offense.
And that's the cool thing about this running back room, and I know you weren't here a year ago, but that was a huge concern at the spring game last year, was they just didn't have the numbers in the running back room. They had Mario Anderson they'd brought in from Division II. They had DJ Braswell that came in as a true freshman, and then that was pretty much it. And Juju McDowell, who's injured this spring. But they had to take Decarrion Joyner, who was a wide receiver a year ago, and turn him into a running back, which we thought was going to be a placeholder for the spring. Like, we'll just get another body in the room. They'll go out and get somebody in the transfer portal to fill that spot. Well, they didn't get anybody in the transfer portal. And Decarrion Joyner was playing running back when the season rolled around, which that contributed to the lack of production you got out of the running back room a season ago. So it's complete 180 this time around to be able to go out and get Rocket Sanders, get Oscar Attaway, get Jawarn Howell. Already have DJ Braswell coming back for your number 2. Matthew Fuller is coming in this fall. Like, it's completely rebuilt and revamped running back room that hopefully can look a whole lot better when the season rolls around.
And again, that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier in the first hour about, investing in those players, long term. That's why you kind of keep those guys around, and that's kind of why you also want them to be in the locker room, be familiar with what's going on, because then when you need them to step up to the plate in a situation kind of like this, then they're ready and available.
It's kind of funny looking at some of the rushing stats. Robbie Ashford actually had some pretty nice runs in this game, but he ends with minus 17 yards because of how many times he got sacked.
Oh, geez.
Similarly with Davis Bevel getting hit with minus 28 yards as well in this game. So, again, the numbers are kind of skewed because, again, any kind of contact with the quarterback, given the fact they were not live, resulted in a sack. But I'd say as a whole, a lot of guys being out there and getting some good runs on Saturday.
Yeah, and, I'd also rather complain about, having negative yardage than, losing maybe a star running back or a star player into a game that's not necessarily overhyped. So,
and, hey, that's the biggest takeaway from this. Nobody got hurt.
Exactly.
Mario Anderson had a little bit of a tweak in his back before the game. I know Judge Collier didn't end up playing because he was dealing with an injury. But as far as guys getting hurt between the lines on Saturday, that didn't happen, which compared to the past couple years is a big plus.
Wow. Yeah. No. I mean, hell. That's why I think, a lot of these games, have over time become, all right, all gas, no brakes in quotation marks.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially when it comes to quarterbacks, running quarterbacks at that with guys like Sellers and Robbie Ashford, you want them to be live because that's a part of their game and being able to elude and, make some yardage. But at the same time, you can't risk it. Which I'm okay with what they were doing with, hey, let them run, but as soon as there's some contact, they're going to be down, or we're not going to be taking them to the ground or anything like that.
There is no biscuit worth risking for that.
Yeah, to a degree. Now, through the other scrimmages earlier on in the spring, they said they were kind of quasi-live, where there was some tackling, but, to wrap up spring practice, where, again, you've already seen these guys for 15 practices beforehand. I don't think having them tackled on Saturday night would have made a huge difference.
Well, when you have guys at the pro level that are, tearing their Achilles because of the turf on a field, I mean, now when you have these practice games, you see some guy get hit and you almost jump because you're like, you don't want to assume the worst, but
right.
When you have, examples like that,
Well, and that's the scariest thing, too, of any football-related activity. You can have non-contact injuries, which Mo Kaba, who, if you'll learn about Mo Kaba, he's been around for a long time here at South Carolina, has been injury after injury after injury, and he stepped onto the field on special teams in game number 1 last year. I think it was the first play he'd been out there and messed up his knee again. And he's going to make another run to come back this year, but we'll see what happens there. But those are the kind of things that you risk anytime you're doing something, is having those no-contact injuries, which, again, thankfully we came away from Saturday night without any of those two.
And I think the athletes that go through those non-contact injuries really have another layer to their mental strength in terms of who they are as an athlete and what their skill set is, because that is really hard to go through.
Absolutely, because you think that anything can result in those kind of injuries, and you got to kind of get over that hump when you do get back there out on the field. I want to get some of y'all's thoughts. 803-404-6100. Love Chevrolet phone lines as well as the Firehouse Subs text line. Chris weighs in and says, happy overreaction Monday. I thought that Dylan Stewart looked very good. In fact, he looked as fast off the line as Clowney. He's just not as big and long, but very promising. I think that's a good way to look at it. Yes, Clowney was a physical specimen, unlike anything we maybe ever seen before, we'll ever see again. But Dylan Stewart, for what he's able to bring to the table, just had that explosiveness off the edge, which, again, when you're talking about affecting quarterbacks, getting back there, he almost took the handoff on one of those tackles for losses that he had. You want to see somebody that has that explosion off the line. That's exactly what Dylan Stewart showed you on Saturday night.
And it kind of pours into why I think people were so overexcited to, see what, he was doing out there. I mean, we were talking about Clowney and, we've kind of been comparing him to Clowney all morning, really. But, I mean, when you have a talent like that, that's kind of showcasing something that has, imminence of, legendary defense, legendary Gamecocks defense, you got to be excited. It gets you out of your seat.
Well, and I don't know if you heard, again, Dylan Stewart doesn't say a whole lot, but when he says something, it speaks volumes. He said last week when asked what his goals for the season were, to be a freshman All-American and to beat the freshman sack total that Jadeveon Clowney set with 8 over a decade ago. So he's putting lofty expectations on himself right out of the gate. Well,
I know after this morning, me and you are both not betting men, but if he doesn't do it this year, I bet at some point in his 3 or 4 year tenure, he definitely could make a good stab at it.
Yeah. Well, which again, for how much that area of the team struggled a season ago, you really hope that he's going to be able to come in and contribute right away, because from what we saw on Saturday night, he looks to be the best athletically at that spot that you have right now.
Mm-hmm. And when you have a guy that, like you were saying about, can come off the edge like that so quickly, it makes it a lot harder for quarterbacks, especially in a conference like the SEC.
Yeah, and it wasn't just him. Again, Kyle Kennard had some good plays on Saturday night. We saw Brian Thomas Jr. look really good. Gilbert Edmond, who is making his return to South Carolina, go out there and have some impact on the quarterbacks as well. So this room as a whole looking better from what we've seen so far. Now, again, you got to get out there and actually do it in actual games against Kentucky and LSU and Oklahoma and stuff like that. But for that feeling and that vibe going through the summer, which, again, that's what the spring game is so much about, just giving you positive things to look forward to and feeling good coming away from the spring game. We at least can say, as of right now, Edge looks okay.
Absolutely, and his play motivates the rest of that room to also want to put their best foot forward. So it'll be interesting to see how his energy and what he brings to the table, gets the rest of the Edge room kind of up and running.
And in the same way, the defensive line looked great on Saturday as well, which we knew that was one of the most experienced groups going into the season, where you got guys like Tonka, you got guys like Boogie, TJ Sanders, Nick Barrett, all returning for another year. You bring in DeAndre Jules, you bring in Markel Goodwine from a place like Alabama. Like, you just have so much depth and experience in that room. It would have been a bigger talking point if they weren't producing on Saturday night, saying, what's wrong with these guys? They play a lot of college football. They should be out there making tackles and making sacks, which they did end up doing.
So I guess it's a good thing that they weren't saying a whole lot about the defensive line. They got all this experience. It seems like they got all their ducks in a row.
Which is another thing when you talk about how much the offensive line struggled on Saturday night. You can say, well, they were going up against an extremely experienced defensive front. And again, they weren't playing as one cohesive same unit that they've been doing through the spring so far. So it's a lot of ebb and flow, a lot of give and take. And again, at least from a defensive side of things, we feel good about what we saw in the trenches.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I know we were one of the things I told you that kind of stuck out to me was the run game literally got stuffed up the middle. And I think you're seeing at, not just the college level, but the pro level too, a lot of really great defenses, start with that strong defensive line.
Right. And I think it was the black run game that was a little more stuffed. And I'm looking to see here. Yeah, so you had Goodwine, you had Jules, you had Tonka, guys like that tackling for the Garnet team. So that makes sense for those guys that you have up front. You also had good linebacker play as well on both sides, or for both teams. Debo Williams, who was leading tackler a year ago, we knew was going to be good. I liked what I saw of Demetrius Knight, is somebody that I was keeping an eye on. Big guy like Kamara from Pitt came in, looked pretty good as well. So again, for those first two levels of defense, you were very encouraged by what you saw from their effect on the quarterbacks in the run game as well.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see how they match up the first couple games of the year. I mean, especially with, how they're going to play LSU and how they're going to be playing Alabama. I think, those two SEC matchups are going to be, it'll be interesting to see how that defensive line combats against those offensive firepowers.
Well, when they do get into those games coming up this fall, a couple different rule changes they're going to be dealing with in college football for the first time in 2024. We'll dive into that. Also hear some of Coach Beamer's thoughts on some of those rules as well as the Extra Point rolls along. He is Sam Shapiro. I'm Tyler Head. Ed Bird producing on the other side of the glass for the Extra Point on your Overreaction Monday on the game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head, Sam Shapiro from WIS TV hanging out with us today, and he'll be in here on Tuesdays going forward. We're going to be out of Firehouse Subs tomorrow, so we kind of rearrange things for this first week, but really cool to get him in here to react to what we saw in the spring game on Saturday night at Williams-Brice Stadium. Speaking of which, we head out to the Love Chevrolet phone lines. Our guy Ray wants to weigh in on what he saw on Saturday night. Ray, appreciate your call as always. How are you feeling coming away from the spring game?
Hey, Tyler. Hey, Sam. Yeah, I just wanted to call in. I'll tell you, I'll say one thing. I got some bone crushers on the defense between the linebacker group and the edge rusher. I was very impressed with that. But I do think that the key to this team, because the SEC, you know, a lot of passing, a lot of that type of stuff, but it's still a line of scrimmage league. I mean, you got to be able to block, got to be able to tackle. That's just football 101 there. But I think what I'm kind of eager to see, and we won't know this until almost the season starts, is how that O-line is going to gel. I think that's going to be our key. I think we're good enough in all the other positions. I mean, you can always improve in all the other positions, but I think the O-line is going to be the key. And if they can gel, then, you know, I think we've got a chance to be a pretty good football team. But just to change the subject, just for a little moment here, got to throw an attaboy out there to Gigi Jackson. Guys, I can honestly say I didn't foresee this happening this year, this soon. I mean, what did he score in his last game, 44 points, something like that? I mean, I think when Moran gets back and that team gels, that may be a team of the future. But anyway, hey, guys, as always, thanks for letting me talk.
Absolutely appreciate that, Ray. 803-404-6100. Quick note on Gigi Jackson, who, of course, is with the Memphis Grizzlies right now, and Ray always loves talking about basketball. I think he surprised a lot of people. I don't think many people were expecting him to maybe get out of the G League in year number one, made it to the main roster, was able to produce for the Grizzlies, who, again, didn't end up, making the playoffs at the end of the day, but nevertheless a good, promising first year for Gigi Jackson at the NBA level.
And it'll be interesting to see how he kind of builds on that, going in with next season. He'll have Ja coming back, joining him, and, it'll be interesting to see what Memphis does next year.
As long as he doesn't hang out with John Morant outside the facility, we should be okay.
Mm-hmm.
But very cool there. And going back to what he said about, the spring game on Saturday night, again, defense looked really great compared to the offensive line, which, again, the offensive line was kind of mixed together. So you didn't have what you assume to be your true starting one unit playing together, which I think that goes a long way. And we talk about this so much. When it comes to the offensive line, they move as one.
Yeah.
And that was such a big struggle a season ago with guys getting hurt and never having the same five up front, really until the 10th game of the year against Vanderbilt, I think it was. That has an effect. And when you have guys that don't know necessarily the mannerisms, the guy next to them, what they're going to be able to do, what kind of slack they need to be able to pick up, that goes a long way. And especially when you're going up against nasty defensive fronts like you're going to week in, week out in the SEC, that can come back to bite you, which we saw so much a season ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's going to be interesting to see how, that new line really gels. They only lost one starting guy from the line to the NFL draft this year. So, 4 returning guys that have had some sort of experience playing with each other last year should be, a little bit more comfortable with each other this year and then kind of fill in that one spot in the middle of the line. It'll be interesting to see over the next couple of months how that kind of solidifies and gels, but I think the key is really going to be, letting the same 5 core group of guys really get used to, what their tendencies are on the line so that they can kind of gel with each other better.
Well, and the biggest thing from that, again, knock on wood, is staying healthy. Mm-hmm. And that was going back to last year's spring game. Jalen Nichols, who was one of the more experienced guys on that offensive line, got hurt in the spring game and it was pretty bad knee injury and was never able to return. He's since jumped into the transfer portal and left the program, and that just kind of started this domino effect when they came to the offensive line of guys getting hurt, game after game after game. God, his name escapes me. Casey Henry, who was expected to be the starting right tackle last season, got hurt like 4 snaps into game number 1, and that became a revolving door of guys playing at that position as the year went along. And you move Rashawn Lee from center out to right tackle, and kept moving guys around to where you just never had this cohesion on the unit that you need. And you were starting true freshmen, for crying out loud, in the middle of the SEC season. None of it was ideal, and it resonated with the running game struggling, with Spencer Rattler not being able to be protected as much as you wanted him to. If you're losing up front, everything else is going to fall into place behind that, unfortunately.
Yeah, and sometimes when you translate guys over to different parts of the line, it doesn't necessarily always translate to their, what their skill set or ability necessarily is. Not taking away from the skill set that they have, because granted, it's a over 300-pound dude usually, that's basically a wall. But I mean, you take somebody from left tackle and then you ask them, oh, go block at right guard. It's a totally different way you have to orient your body and prevent the player from trying to get to the quarterback or, get past you. And sometimes it can really, if you're used to having the left side to kind of protect the edge a little bit better, rather than the other side, like sometimes orientation is a huge make or break for some of these players.
And Coach Beamer made it a point when he came here to South Carolina to build a really strong, big offensive line, which is something that we've seen, lead to a lot of success at places like Alabama, more recently, places like Georgia, to go out there and get these 6'6", 6'7", 310, 320-pound guys, those true earth movers up front to really make a difference. And it takes time to build those kind of things up. But when you look at what he's been able to bring in the portal these past couple seasons, or not in the portal, out of recruiting classes these past couple seasons, he's creating that and he's making it happen. The Great Wall of South Carolina, as people are calling it, but it does take time. And again, at the end of the day, everybody's got to stay healthy, which just wasn't the case a season ago.
Well, we'll have to find a wall or a bridge to name the line after, and then.
Well, we have the two bridges that go across the river right there as you cross over into West Columbia and Lexington County and all that kind of stuff.
We'll have to take
if it goes well enough.
We'll have to take some ideas back to the drawing board. And,
I'm sure. You know what?
Brainstorm.
We're in the world of NIL now, so if like a construction company wants to just sponsor the offensive line or give those guys NIL deals, I think that would go a long way.
It definitely could. I mean, I don't see why they wouldn't be interested in it.
You know what? Our friends at TEC Equipment Rentals sponsor our Tuesday segment, and they're all about making things move with tractors and all that kind of stuff, big, heavy machinery. I feel like that'd be the perfect type of NIL deal for the guys up front moving guys around. You know what I mean?
You said it, not me.
I'm just thinking out loud here. There's a lot of opportunities, a lot of potential. I know the Arkansas offensive line a couple years ago got a deal from a barbecue restaurant out there in Fayetteville, which was all-you-can-eat barbecue, which is perfect for big guys. You know what I mean? So something a little bit in line with what would work perfectly with an offensive line. I got a million ideas up here, just kind of spitballing here.
Oh, I'm excited, but kind of going back to what we were talking about before and the line meshing. Especially with teams and offenses, it all kind of trickles down to the line. If your line's not kind of in sync with each other, then the quarterback, can't run the offense the way they want to. They can't hit the weapons that are running around, running the routes.
Right.
Then your wide receivers are getting cardio. They're not catching the ball.
Right.
And then everything is just kind of one big hot mess. So it really it starts with that line. If they can even give the quarterback ample time to get off a pass in 3-4 seconds, it could be a major difference maker.
Our guy, Gamecock Central, Chris Clark, I know it's kind of hard to keep up with watching the game on Saturday night in the stands and at home, but he did detail the first offensive line unit that was out there with the North Sellers and the Garnet team to start the game was Josiah Thompson, Kamar Bell, Vershawn Lee, Torricelli Simpkins, and Kason Henry at right tackle. And when you look at that, I mean, Vershawn Lee is going to be the starting center, assuming he doesn't get hurt. And then Kason Henry we would think maybe be that starting right tackle like he was start of the season ago. So you're having three guys on that offensive line to start the game with your primary quarterback at this point in time that aren't likely going to be starters when the season rolls around, or maybe one of those guys is. But again, that's not an offensive line unit comprised of your 5 true starters at this point in time.
Yeah, and so I think if that's the case, if they're not going to be starting, I guess, in the fall, I guess my question is, how are they going to, help the people that are going to be in that position, be ready so that that line is, kind of, they're all on the same page, when they take the field, September, October.
And that's a good point that you bring up, that you want everybody to be as ready as possible. Because again, if you run into a scenario like last year where they were dropping like 5s, you want to be able to interchange these guys and not have a drop off, which there's going to be some kind of difference because there's a reason your starters are your starters and your backups are your backups. But, hopefully this mixing and matching that we saw on Saturday night can prove to be beneficial at the end of the day should you come into one of those unlikely scenarios or unfortunate scenarios, I guess is the better way to put it, with a patchwork offensive line once again this season.
Mm-hmm. And like we were talking about, keeping it vanilla, I think they were just trying to see what plug and plays would work based on just kind of what they were working with that that weekend.
Right. Again, appreciate your call there, Ray. 803-404-6100 is the Love Chevrolet phone lines as well as the Firehouse Subs text line. Up next, we will get into the rule changes of college football and hear Coach Beamer's thoughts on how the fall is going to look a little bit different this year in college. That's coming up. It's the Extra Point. He is Sam Shapiro from WIS-TV. I'm Tyler Head here on The Game. Welcome back in. It's the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Sam Shapiro along with you here on this Overreaction Monday. Ed Bird producing for us on the other side of the glass. Saturday night was the opportunity to obviously get the first glimpse at what this team's going to look like in 2024. Also, the first opportunity to break in some new rules in college football. This was approved at the end of last week for the upcoming season. Helmet communication, now officially legal across the board in college football. So just like the NFL, you're going to have the ability to talk to the quarterback as well as likely a linebacker on defense up until about 15 seconds before the play starts. So, you know, the signaling and stuff that was the crux of the Connor Stallions situation in Michigan a season ago won't be gone completely, but the effectiveness will be diminished significantly now the fact that you can talk to quarterbacks and stuff directly into their helmets.
I feel like that is going to, well, for one, if I'm a quarterback and I got another ear in my, I have another voice in my ear all the time like that, I feel like that would give me a headache a little bit. But it's got to help, you know, when you got 30, 40, 50,000 people screaming and
Sure.
you just want to know what the play call is.
Sure. And, you know, with college football having kind of been set in its ways for a long time, I'm really surprised this hasn't happened before because the technology's been there for a very long time.
Yeah.
And the NFL's been doing it forever. Like, there was really no reason not to do it, but I think the fact that we saw the Connor Stallions situation in Michigan happen, it kind of sped this along. Like, all right, we want to try and avoid that happening again. Let's just go ahead and give it to them. And we saw this teased a little bit in the bowl games season ago, where some bowl games were allowed to use the helmet communication, but again, now it's available across the board.
I'm just curious how they do it. I mean, you know, how do you hardwire a helmet so that you could...
That would be a good question for the football equipment staff. I imagine it's kind of like an earpiece type thing. Now, when you look at the NFL, they typically have, like, I think dual earpieces in because you'll see quarterbacks put both hands over their ears to kind of be able to hear it a little bit better. But I imagine it works just kind of like any kind of two-way type deal because they're not able to talk back to the coordinator themselves. They're just hearing the information relate to them.
I'm just thinking the guy, you know, his head's getting banged by everybody all day, you know, for an hour.
Yeah. Oh, so like the durability is what you're questioning.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good question. Now, again, helmet technology's come a long way, so I imagine whatever they use to put in the quarterback or linebacker's helmet's probably along the same lines of being effective despite getting knocked around a lot over the course of a game.
Yeah, now all the technology that goes into, you know, avoiding the CTE and, you know, concussion-related injuries and, you know, just any head-neck-related, you'd hope, you know, they would at least protect the technology that is going to be in the helmet. So
I would say up until this point, I don't think it's been a problem in the NFL. So whatever technology they use there, I imagine will be the same in college football. Let's hear what Coach Beamer had to say about the testing of helmet communication for the first time. Cut number 7 here, Ed. Cut number 7 here, Ed. This is Coach Beamer talking about the helmet communication on Saturday night.
I think good. We've done the headset in some of the practices just to get used to hearing it. We've been doing that a little kind of off and on all spring. We didn't do it every single practice, David, but we did it some of the practices. But I definitely wanted to do it tonight just because the next time we're in that big a crowd, we'll be doing it for real in August. And just being able to get used to the noise in the background, the band, the fans, all that. Thought we needed to do it tonight. I think it went well, best I can tell. And then the tablets, I don't know. We had a bunch of them down there, and same thing. I told the coaches, just get used to, you know, even if it's nothing to really look at, but just get your guys on the sideline after each series and just kind of go through something so they're used to seeing that also. So that'll be new, obviously, in college football for us, but we want to be able to take advantage of it and not have the first game against Old Dominion be the first time we try all that stuff.
And, again, this is something that I'm surprised it's taken this long to get into college football, but once games start getting played, you're not even going to notice. It's not going to really make that big of a difference. Sure, some teams probably going to have the giant goofy cards on the sidelines like they've had in years past, but again, it's not going to have any effect on the game itself being played between the white lines.
Hey, man, now you got college players that can get paid. We've had that before. They've got play calling and the system's going. There's always surprises coming and going.
There is, and it seems as the years go by, more and more of college football is getting aligned with what the NFL does, including this other rule change that's going to be in effect this year, a 2-minute warning coming to college football. So just like in the NFL, 2 minutes before halftime and 2 minutes before the end of the game, we will have another stoppage of the clock.
That is going to be a major, major big deal. Like, you go into 2 minutes, you have no timeouts left. You basically get a free timeout.
Yeah, you can use it to your advantage, much like teams in the NFL do. The funny thing to me, though, is now they put this under the guise of wanting to speed the game up when they stopping the clock on first downs a season ago, which was one of the biggest differences between college football and the NFL for a long time was on first down, the clock stops in college and it doesn't in the NFL. They got rid of that last year, except for in the final 2 minutes of each half, under the guise of wanting to speed the games up and make them finish quicker. Now you're adding 2 guaranteed timeouts into these games that effectively make the game longer again, which to a degree, it's only a couple of minutes, but still, it seems counterproductive to what you were trying to do a season ago.
Just a little bit. I mean, just a little bit.
I do think it's worth noting because the immediate reaction to this was, oh, God, here comes another timeout that, college football is already getting egregiously bad at a season ago with the extra time they had to fill with the clock running so much. According to everything that I've read, this is not going to be another television timeout like we see in the NFL.
Okay.
In the NFL, 2 minutes, you get another commercial break before the end of the half. To my knowledge, it is not going to be that way in college football, at least for now, because that can always change.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it like if it's not going to be, if they're just throwing in another timeout, but they don't, or this break, but they don't want it to slow the game down, which is, something they're clearly trying to work against. I'm just curious, is it going to be like a 30-second break or?
I think it can be one of those things, and we're seeing a lot of TV networks do this now where it's like a side-by-side commercial.
Yeah.
Where like you're still showing
it's like a two-shot
in the huddle and like, all right, well, the NFL does this like, all right, we'll be right back in 30 seconds after this word from Duracell. So like you're still showing the field, but you're also satisfying a commercial as well. So there's a lot of different ways they could go with this. And while I'm not personally a fan of the 2 minute warning, to a degree, I understand it as well because in the final 2 minutes of the half, with the new rule that was put in place last year, the clock does stop on first down. So 2 minutes before halftime, 2 minutes before the end of the game, the clock will stop on first down like it's done for so many years before in college football. So putting a 2 minute warning in place kind of draws a line in the sand of the difference between the clock rules in one part of the game and the other. So to that degree, I understand it, even though I'm still not fully on board with this being in college football now.
Yeah. I also don't. It's interesting. I don't really know how to feel about it either, but it'll be interesting to see how teams work around it because I definitely think coaches will approach the last 5 minutes of the game significantly different.
It adds a completely different element of strategy. Like you said, you may go into the final 2 minutes without any timeouts, and boom, there you get one. Or you might save your timeouts, and now you have a fourth guaranteed timeout, depending on how you play it with the 2 minute warning. So it adds a different element of strategy to the game, which will be interesting to see. I just don't think it was a necessary step, to say the least, in terms of, which again, I've always appreciated the fact that college football has been way different than the NFL in so many different ways. And now the clock rules are almost completely aligned with professional football, which I'm not the biggest fan of.
It takes away from the uniqueness of that type of football, and it takes away from why those fans really are so invested in, or partly in, because a lot of the people went to the school and, were in the environment. But that also, I think, takes away, well, what I was saying before also kind of takes away from that experience of being immersed in that team and that winning culture.
Absolutely. So a couple new changes come to college football. Also going to have the ability to use tablets on the sideline as well, which is something they also tried out on Saturday night. And again, that's not something you're going to ever care about when the season actually starts. It's just, embracing the technology that you already have around us that the NFL has been using for a long time anyway. So again, just another thing that makes sense from the perspective of the college game. But again, I'm not the biggest fan of the 2 minute warning.
Yeah, I think they were just trying to get acquainted with a lot of the stuff, early on, just so that when the season kind of starts to ramp up, it's not like you're breaking in a new pair of shoes.
Yeah, exactly. It makes a lot of sense. And they've used it through scrimmages. They'll use it through fall camp and all that kind of stuff. So when Old Dominion rolls around to week number 1, it's not going to be anything new. It's going to be, a habit at that point in time.
Yeah, it'll feel like bread and butter, eating the same bowl of cereal they've been eating for breakfast.
There you go.
The last 6-7 months.
Exactly. We'll come back and wrap up today's edition of the Extra Point, get some of your Warrior thoughts from the Firehouse Subs text line. Also learn a little bit more about Sam, as again, he's going to be in with us each and every week going forward. It is the Extra Point. He's Sam Shapiro. I'm Tyler Head on your Monday morning on The Game. Welcome back in. Extra Point, Tyler Head, Sam Shapiro, wrapping up today's edition of the show. Coming up next, it is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. We'll get Wes and Chris's insight. They were there on the broadcast for Saturday night's spring game, so we'll get their thoughts coming away from the spring game and spring practice as well. More of your thoughts, 803-404-6100 from the Firehouse Subs text line. Nama's text weighs in and says, biggest takeaway I had was the fall off from the first two quarterbacks to the second set appears to be huge. Again, I think you also have to bake in the element of the offensive line not being as good once you get down to your third and fourth string quarterbacks, as well as not having the same playmakers around you out there as well. So Dante Reno was throwing to walk-ons at that point in time. You know what I mean? Backups. So I don't think he had the complement of weapons that Lenore Sellers or Robbie Ashford had around them to make them look as good as they could have looked. I'll say that much.
Well, he looked better than I would have looked. I can tell you that.
Hey, you're pretty tall. You at least have the height for a quarterback.
I don't have the arm.
You don't have the arm. You're not the thickest guy in the world either. So that probably wouldn't bode too well for you.
Could definitely use a cheeseburger. I could tell you that much.
I was gonna say you may not be able to take some of those hits from those big beefy defensive linemen. You might be out for a while after that one.
I do joke with my friends occasionally, though, that my throw on the run is better than my regular throw. So,
well, hey, when you're running for your life, that can increase some of those skills sometimes.
Yeah, and it'll definitely you're definitely looking where you're throwing.
That's right. So as we wrap up the show, again, Sam going to be with us starting on Tuesdays going forward each and every week. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier. You're from WIS-TV, but you have a background in sports. So tell people a little bit of how you came to be where you are and your background in the sports game.
Yeah, so my passion since high school has always been to sit at a desk and read sports where there's palm trees. And now I got the palm trees, but I'm originally
Palmetto trees.
Excuse me, I made that mistake last week.
I was going to say
the
I
palmetto
corrected you
trees
on that last week.
So I went to school in New York. I grew up in New York City. I studied sports media at Ithaca College, and when I graduated, I really wanted to do broadcast television. I knew I really wanted to continue being, my career as a sports reporter. So I realized, there are more opportunities to kind of work as a news reporter or an on-air, news personality than there would be in sports. So I found a station up kind of in that area in Elmira, New York. And I worked there right after I graduated for about a year and a half doing news. And then things kind of opened up on the weekends where a sports weekend position for anchoring kind of opened up. I had kind of been filming some high school games for them on the side, like during the week once I get done with the news stuff. So my sports director at the time asked me, hey, would you kind of want to fill in? I know you're not planning on kind of staying here for the long haul, but, we kind of need somebody now. And that was, kind of the golden opportunity I'd been looking for. So I was doing that for the last 6-7 months, anchoring sports on the weekends up in New York. And then this opportunity down at WIS opened up, and here I am.
And when can they find you on the air on WIS?
So typically I'm on the air Wednesday through Sundays. I'm usually in like the regular date. Well, Wednesdays I'm on prime times, our primetime show at 7:30. WIS News primetime at 7:30. And then usually Thursday, Fridays, I'm in like the regular weekly shows that are on 4, 5, 6, 7 o'clock. And then I'm also on the weekends at 6 o'clock as well.
Very cool. So you can see him on WIS-TV. Also, again, you'll be able to hear him starting every Tuesday going forward here on The Extra Point. We'll get his thoughts on what's going on in the world of sports each and every week. I got to ask, how often do you get asked about your accent now that you're down here in the South?
Well, I went to the Blythewood Rodeo and it was quite literally my first rodeo.
Yep.
On Friday, and I think I had at least 4 people go, so where are you from? And I went, New York, and they went, I can hear it.
Did you ever get you ain't from around here, are you, boy? You get that?
I think I've gotten that verbatim probably like once.
Yeah.
But I've gotten some rendition of that a handful of times already.
Yeah, because that's the first thing that sticks out. You haven't heard our guy Mike Uval from Gamecock Central on here yet, or maybe you have. He's from Boston.
Okay.
And he sounds like he's from Boston. So I think you two might be able to have a good back and forth on the Northeast.
Oh, it'll be awesome.
And out accent each other. His accent's thicker than yours is. I'll say that much.
Well, we can bond over the super fun winters and. Well, Boston wins a championship every 90 minutes. New York, it's like every 90 years.
So those darn 3-year-old kids in Boston haven't seen a parade in their lifetime. It's a darn shame.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to think when the last one in New York was, and
it's been a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I think it was 90. It was there's a documentary on it, but it was the year the Knicks and the Rangers were both in the the Rangers won the Stanley Cup, and then that 8th seed Knicks team ended up losing to Hakeem.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, here in South Carolina, the last parade was just over a week ago when the South Carolina women's team won the national championship.
That was awesome. That was a great experience.
No strangers to parades around here, and hopefully many more to come on the horizon. But Sam, appreciate you hanging out here for the first time on the X Point, and we'll be excited to get you in here next week and get you in here week in and week out as we roll through the year.
It's been a blast so far, and I'm looking forward to keep hanging out with you guys.
You can find him on Twitter at Sam Shapiro TV, and again, we'll have him back in here next week as well. That'll do it for today's edition of the Extra Point. Coming up next is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the Game.